Alright guys, TacticalRab back again today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. Welcome back to F1 News. And qualifying here at the Bahrain Grand Prix has just concluded a crazy day, upset all across the park, and a Ferrari back on pole position. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you are new as always. I'd greatly appreciate it. Let's dive straight into things. Firstly, meme of the day, to be honest, comes out of the Red Bull camp earlier on. Well, this was getting used a fair bit, to be honest, with the FIA report that came out not too long after that. Before we talk about that, just wanted to mention this real quick from Neil's Wittage. So it was made very clear in a briefing supposedly last night before today that the white line defines the track limit, of course, as is meant to be the case. Now, of course, that was said. Whether that's enforced or not is another question, because today again there were some concerns like, okay, yes, that's the rule, but on some corners people definitely take their chances. I believe it was even in maybe one of the F3 races or something, someone actually got a 5-second time penalty for kind of going outside the white lines too often in the actual race itself. So maybe that'll be policed more kind of strictly this year, but still, whether it was actually being used in qualifying to a great degree is a bit of a question mark, because there were a few laps that kind of Perez went over the line and they weren't necessarily discounted, it seemed, at the time. So definitely, despite it being said, whether it's actually enforced, that is a bit of another question mark. You'd think it would be. But this also just to mention, because the Abu Dhabi report comes out from the FIA, long awaited. Of course, look, what do people really expect from this report, to be honest? The FIA was not really going to admit too much wrongdoing. Mercedes, of course, dropped their appeal, kind of with the idea, I would have thought, that the FIA were going to do a proper report into this. But at the end of the day, they're investigating themselves. What are they really going to say? So it was stated that human error basically decided the finish in a way. So you would think that by saying that an error contributed to one driver winning over the other, that that's of course kind of on them to some degree. But then they go on to say kind of emphatically that the results are valid, final, and cannot now be changed, basically because Mercedes didn't continue with their appeal. So bit of a weird one. I don't really know what people expected, to be perfectly honest, just because what was the FIA going to do? They're obviously going to say the results are legitimate because they can't really afford not to. Describing our human error, of course, for Massey led to the fact that not all cars were allowed to unlap themselves, all this type of stuff. These were kind of some of the key takeaways. I completely agree that the final lap radio messages, of course, between Red Bull, Mercedes, Massey had a negative impact on the final laps. Distraction for the race director. Don't deny that right at all. But at the end of the day, rules are certainly getting changed from now on. But yeah, some people, I suppose, expected more action here from the FIA as a result. But look, they're investigating themselves, I suppose, at the end of the day. Let's dive then into the actual action on track here in Bahrain. So Leclerc was having a good time. The car's an absolute beauty, and it's actually quick as well. It's honestly phenomenal to see. So this was FP3, finished off very similar, honestly, to how the day ended up, frankly, just in terms of the kind of order. Verstappen, Leclerc, Perez, Russell was there at P4 at this point, Hamilton down in P6. In fairness, this session looked a lot better for Mercedes than some of the previous ones had, and that honestly kind of continued into qualifying. They looked somewhat better today, but still way off the pace, to be honest, of the front runners. We'll have a look at it in a second. But Kevin Magnussen up in 7th, P7 here, Bottas there or thereabouts in the Alfa Romeo. Zhou was actually here at P9 at this point. But again, things honestly changed a fair bit from this, at least in some of the drivers. But outside of that, this is honestly very similar to the Beckham order as it ended up. Q1 was quite remarkable. Bottas goes straight here into P4. It was Leclerc and Sainz P1, P2 here, Verstappen P3. Bottas right behind Verstappen and ahead of Hamilton, right? You can't make this stuff up. Doesn't matter. You can't separate these two guys. And the way Q3 finished, they're actually inseparable still. They're next to each other on the grid for tomorrow's race, which is absolutely fantastic stuff. But out in Q1, snowed at Hulkenberg, Riccardo, Stroll, and Latifi. So very tough day for Aston Martin. Also, didn't really expect too much from Hulkenberg, but a tough time. Riccardo as well, of course. He didn't really get too much practice, testing last week in the McLaren. But horrible day for them, no doubt. They've really struggled in testing here as well so far in practice. So Riccardo P18, not what they were looking for. Then it goes on to Q2, and Bottas gets through Q2 in the Alfa Romeo, gets to Q3 to continue his crazy 102 appearances in a row in Q3. So wonder how long that'll last. But he's been doing some good work in this Alfa right now. Clearly a very quick car. And also Haas into Q3, I believe, for the first time since about 2019. The last 2 years have been atrocious. Both drivers get, Mick Schumacher, we'll see he gets his best ever, I'm pretty sure, qualifying performance. And Magnussen gets all the way into Q3. So he makes it all the way through. Schumacher, I believe, was P12. Pretty sure that's his best performance ever. And out in Q2, Ocon, Mick Schumacher in 12th. Norris in 13th. Again, pretty poor from McLaren. Albon gets all the way to Q2 as well. So congratulations to him and the Williams guys. And Zhou comes 15th here as well. So he did well getting into Q2. So, all of a sudden, immediately straight off the bat, there's some upsets here to discuss, right? The fact that Schumacher, great qualifying for him. Haas in general look very strong right now, to be honest. You could argue right now it's even Haas versus Mercedes for kind of the third strongest constructor, at least at the present time. And good performances from Albon back in business, Zhou as well. But the top 10 are kind of as follows. These, of course, the final drivers that go out onto the track. And early on, it was actually Ferrari that had a couple of cracking laps. Sainz actually, was the kind of pole sitter at 1:36.86 P7 early on. Leclerc was just behind him, but I feel like Verstappen had more in the tank. He kind of messed up the end of his final lap, or at least his first lap. He was about a tenth or so down. But honestly, very similar to what we saw second time around. I was very surprised. Like Verstappen and the Red Bulls seemed to be quite a way ahead of the pace, right? And Perez was way off Verstappen. It felt like Verstappen was just dominating in this car. But all of a sudden, the Ferraris are right there and there again. And this is how it finishes up on the very final lap. Verstappen, I thought he was going to get him. I think he had a purple first sector, fell just shy in the second sector, and then the Ferraris have been very good in the third sector on this track. So, Leclerc takes pole by a tenth, 1:30.558. Verstappen right behind him. I believe he was talking that he kind of messed up his final corner. I believe his first lap, he wasn't very happy with how his tyres temperatures were, and Sainz couldn't improve, unfortunately, his second time around, but that was good enough for P3. So, remarkable, right? It's a kind of a Red Bull sandwich at the top. Ferrari, Red Bull, Ferrari. Leclerc got pole here 3 years ago in 2019, does that again, and honestly, like, what a start to this new era, to be honest. I was kind of concerned today that Red Bull, the way they've been looking, Verstappen would just run away with pole and the race. Who knows what happens tomorrow, but qualifying is definitely a good start, especially with the racing that we hope to get tomorrow and the excitement that should bring in the new era, right? Like, it should just be phenomenal stuff. Now, Haas, like, what a result from there, no words. They make it all the way, 92,000 likes on this on Twitter. They make it all the way to P7 for Magnussen, so remarkable scenes, to be honest, from where Haas were last year, right behind Hamilton on the grid. And it must be said, the run down to turn 1 tomorrow is very long indeed, so a lot could change. Like, yes, this is qualifying, but things could change right from the start of the race. I'd expect them to be honest. And here we go. This is the grid. So Leclerc, Verstappen, Sainz is your top 3. Then Perez right behind Verstappen. I believe there was about 2.5 tenths in it, which I guess is what you might expect between these two drivers. So that seems to really be where Red Bull are. Of course, the race pace is a very different matter, because Mercedes were somewhat concerned that, their race pace might actually be significantly slower than the top, 2 teams right now, quite clearly, Ferrari and Red Bull. Hamilton gets P5, pretty much the best I think he could have done with that car, to be honest, the way it was looking today. Somewhat better than it has been, but still not great at all, and I think the race pace they are concerned about. Toto was saying they're struggling in the straight right now with quite high drag, despite the fact that I thought the whole idea of the side pods was to reduce the drag. So an interesting one. Russell messed up his final lap. I'm pretty sure his Q2 time would have got him P6 here, right behind Hamilton, but he messed up his lap in Q3, and he messed up the final lap as well, I believe. They were talking about the tyres and stuff like this. Messed up his first corner, ruined his lap. He goes P9. So this is pretty funny, actually, because I think last season Russell was saying something about Bottas coming P9 in the Mercedes, and I was kind of roasting him for it. Basically, it's happened to him this time around. And honestly, still inseparable, Hamilton and Bottas, right? P5, P6. Bottas, what a performance from him, honestly, in the Alfa Romeo. Like, at P6 here, very impressive stuff. Magnussen and the Haas right behind him, so crazy qualifying day. Alonso, Russell, Gasly rounds out the top 10, and then the other 10, of course, we looked at. This, the gaps between the cars, because it's certainly relevant. So Leclerc on pole by a tenth, Sainz like 6/1000ths behind Verstappen, so it was almost a Ferrari front row lockout if Verstappen didn't just improve slightly on that second lap, and if Sainz got a slightly better second lap in, it would have been a Ferrari front row lockout. Of course, that might have changed the picture entirely on how it goes down into turn 1 tomorrow. But yeah, Hamilton down here, basically 7 tenths off the lead, which is this seems where, and you can see the Q2 time actually from George Russell was right where Hamilton was as well. So yeah, right now 7 tenths off the Ferrari, and they reckon, I'm pretty sure Hamilton said after the fact that in their kind of race testing, race simulation they did in practice, they were about a second behind where Ferrari and Red Bull were, which obviously is a big deal. So they reckon maybe they've improved somewhat, but are still very concerned for the race tomorrow, and they reckon that the Ferraris and the Red Bulls are just going to race away from the rest of the field, which maybe is the case, but hopefully at least we get a good battle up front. It certainly seems that we are going to have that, because all the top 4 drivers separated by 4 tenths, P1 to P3 with basically 1 tenth in it. It's a very exciting stuff. Russell obviously has a pretty poor lap, which puts him down in 9th. The car was probably good enough for 5th, 6th, and it seems a pretty clear distinction right now between the top 2, then Mercedes, then the rest, and Haas of course are there or thereabouts as well. Alfa Romeo with Bottas up in 6th. Has to be said, the winners of the day, the Ferrari power units were out of control. They looked very good indeed. Ferrari, Alfa, Haas, they're on the up most certainly. Mercedes, McLaren and Aston Martin, the Mercedes powered cars, very much on the other end. Aston Martin had a horrible day, as did McLaren, and Mercedes haven't been looking all that great either. In a straight line, like the speed you might expect them to have, certainly wasn't there. Upgrades over the season are going to decide the title, you would think, at the end of the day, but Mercedes are going to have to be there or thereabouts within 3 or 4 races if they want to put together a realistic title charge with how competitive the top 2 look right now. Some funny words actually in kind of the post-race interviews, as Verstappen says, he was asked by David Coulthard, you must be disappointed that Mercedes seemed to be off the pace. He was like, yeah, very, very disappointed about that indeed. And Hamilton goes on to say as well, like, those guys ahead of us, Ferrari and Red Bull, own another league right now. So he was basically saying, like, he's going to have to watch his back really for tomorrow. Those are the guys he's racing to try and, fend off Bottas and the rest of the field in quite a remarkable circumstance, rather than looking ahead. Who knows how it will go? Like, look, but the whole sandbagging thing that Mercedes were supposedly doing, at least by some people, that didn't really seem all that plausible looking at the way the car was handling the last couple of weeks, definitely doesn't seem to be the case, unless they are, of course, just sandbagging completely I'm waiting for tomorrow to turn up the jets and just blast through to P1. But I somehow doubt that's going to be the case, to be perfectly honest. And just this to finish up with Tom, I thought was pretty cool. Like first head-to-head kind of matchups of the season so far. Leclerc takes down Sainz, of course, both on the podium. Verstappen, Perez, no surprise there. Hamilton, Russell, Bottas, Zhou, Magnussen, Schumacher, Alonso versus Ocon. And yeah, the rest of you guys, I'm sure you can figure out and probably predict these going into the qualifying relatively well indeed. But very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new as always. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.